everybody's trying to make money. Everybody's trying to be productive. And everybody's trying to be very good at what they do. And that kind of environment creates stress. And stressful environments lend themselves to people putting a lot of pressure on other people. And it's not necessarily always a bad thing. I mean, you have to kind of put pressure on your teams because people are expected to win and to be world class in what they do. However, if it goes in the wrong direction, it can create problems within teams. And so one particular section called psychological safety was very useful to me in every industry that I've ever been a part of, in terms of making sure teams feel safe, being open and honest, and telling me when things are not right. So that's very important in a production facility, because it could be that something unsafe is happening, and a team member needs to be able to refer that to his boss or her boss. And if you don't feel psychologically safe being open and honest with your boss, something really bad could happen. There's one leader who has created an environment where he's Superman and he has to do all of the functions and all the tasks, and the decisions can only be made by him or her. You're wasting 30 people who could help you. You're wasting people who could help you solve problems, people who could help you get better and be more efficient. You're wasting all this opportunity. You want to leverage that talent and that expertise out on the floor. To do that, I think intent-based leadership really helped us provide us with a framework in which to communicate those expectations and to invite people to start thinking like the leader.
So I'm interested in thinking about some of the elements of the development work. What resonated most for you, and what impact did you see? What were some of the ideas and practices of intent-based leadership which you felt were most interesting and most relevant?
Yeah, I think probably three stick out right off the bat. One is that good leaders create the environments where people essentially know how to behave and know how to act. And so those environments are what drive the behaviors that get the results. Two, definitely the ladder of leadership, very practical tool, very simple to use. In many organizations, they carry badge holders, or people typically have security codes that you use to scan in and out of buildings and things like that. And it was very simple to just put the ladder of leadership in my scanner, and that's what a lot of people do in businesses. But I think psychological safety was kind of the dark horse that people didn't necessarily expect to stand out, but it did.
And when you're dealing in that with the type of environment of Tyson, and with the number and the volume of employees, that payoff can begin to expand quite quickly. I think these are some of the toughest jobs that people can do in any line of work, if you're up in that food production environment. And therefore, the difference that could be made in terms of actually, does my supervisor care about me? Am I having a conversation with them? What happens when the machine goes down? Is somebody concerned for my well-being? Do I have a proper conversation if I've had a period of absence? That's what I think I was struck by, is that's where we can make the difference. Because I guess probably the reality is that 95% of somebody's working day, when they're in that high intensity manufacturing environment, is routine. And therefore it's the points where we break the routine. That's when I'm going to find out whether my supervisor is here really, first and foremost to look after my well-being and to support me, or just I'm telling you what to do and I don't care.
If the leader's smart, he'll create a situation where people feel comfortable challenging assumptions and asking questions like, I know we've always done it this way, but could we do it better? Is there a better way to do this? If the environment's as it should be, the creativity and the possibilities are just endless, because the people who often know how to fix it are the ones doing the work every day. I saw a lot of creativity out in the field since we've implemented this.
So what I'm really interested in with this is that question in that specific environment. So we've been thinking a little bit around the question of psychological safety, which I think always seen as being fundamental and a foundation. You cannot ask people to speak up. You can't ask people to make a decision or talk about why something has gone wrong if they don't feel safe to do so. Is it that people in a team feel really unsafe, or do they not yet feel safe? And what I'm interested in here is that if I imagine and think back to some of the operating environments there, you might have a supervisor working with hourly paid teams, and those hourly paid teams would traditionally be used to the supervisor comes along and tells me what to do and gives me the directions, solves the problem. And just the very nature of the work and the operating environment, probably the risk could be that the kind of the sense of hierarchy between being a team member and a supervisor might be steeper than you might see, for example, within the corporate function of the same organization. And therefore, the expectation of me as a team member speaking up or contributing and saying, well, what went wrong? Probably was even more challenging in that environment. And therefore, the role of a supervisor in terms of creating that safety and inviting and engaging people to contribute and to feel safe to speak up, feels to me to be even more critical. Or it's so fundamental and so important.
Yeah. And I'll actually take it a little bit of a different direction, Peter. As a pitcher in baseball, I really needed the freedom to call my own pitches. In baseball, there's like a cultural expectation. There's kind of two trains of thought here. One is that the coach should call the pitches, and the coach relays the pitch to the catcher. The catcher, gives the pitcher a 1 or a 2 or 3, whatever, relays that pitch expectation onto the pitcher. Now, in some camps, you should just do what the coach tells you to do and throw what the coach tells you to throw. The problem is your curveball may be off that day, or your arm may not feel as strong as it usually does, which means your fastball, it's not going to have the zip on it that it may have. And additionally, the pitcher is in the best position to know how close the batter is to the plate. Maybe you need to go inside on him because he's hugging the plate, or maybe you need to throw a low and away curveball because the hitter looked foolish on the previous curveball you threw, or whatever the case may be. In baseball, if the pitcher does not want to throw the suggested pitch from the catcher, you shake it off. You say, no, I don't want that. Right. And then he'll give you another pitch. So an example might be fastball inside. I say, nope. He'll go fastball outside, up, and then boom, you throw the pitch. And so I was in the best position to know what pitch was working for me that day. I was in the best position to know what the hitter looked like, how close he was to the plate, what I thought I could do as a performer, as a pitcher. When my catcher and I really got on the same page, it was almost like he could think like me. He knew what I wanted to do in most situations. He knew how good my fastball was that day. If I'm throwing hard, he's gonna call more fastballs. He knows how good the curveball looks, whether it's sports or whether it's a production facility. Give people the freedom to make the decisions who are closest to the work, and you'll get the best outcomes. And we did see that at Tyson. When we say leaders create the right environments, you could use the word culture too. The culture or the environment, whatever's in that culture environment is what drives the behaviors. And so I think that was one of the things I remember about that particular organization, just really, really good at, like, if you see something unsafe, say something. If something's not right, be open, be honest about it. And psychological safety just fit really well.
I think the sports analogy is really interesting. And I think fundamentally as leaders, you've got a choice to make about the way in which you want to go about operating and behaving on a day-to-day basis.
I think the mark of a great leader is not necessarily how well that particular leader executed, but when that leader's not there, how well is the team executing? There were times where I would intentionally show up to a meeting late, unannounced, just to see if they would start the meeting without me. And they did. They would just kind of carry on without me. And there were so many times that I might be in a meeting with that team, and the senior manager's leading a big project. I knew the answer to the question, but I would just intentionally kind of sit back. And it's funny because the business partners would look to me like, all right, Eric, you're the director, make the decision. And I would just refuse to give them the answer. And it was incredible to me to see one of my senior managers just jump in there and say, well, this is what we're going to do. And that person would be so confident that not only they know what the right answer is because they have a high degree of clarity around the situation, but that they feel comfortable taking the lead, and they don't worry that I'm going to overstep and yank control back from them. They feel totally comfortable saying, hey, I'm in charge. It's my project. Let me do it.
Sometimes we hear, well, I've got people who just want to turn up and do their job. And that's because they hear back, yeah, that's your job to do it. And I think this idea of practice of, so just keep asking, what do you see? What do you think? What would you do in this situation? Simply to get used to the idea of you're going to ask the question, and maybe eventually you get the breakthrough.
Yeah. If you want to be a great baseball player, you have to practice the things that get the results that you want. Too many times leaders want to wish a new world upon themselves. That's not how it works. You have to go practice throwing the baseball. You have to practice hitting a baseball. You have to practice catching a baseball if you want to win baseball games. Same is true for leadership. If you want to be a good leader, you have to practice giving people control. You have to allow them to make some reasonable mistakes. You have to give them the clarity that they need to be successful and make sure they have the competency to justify doing the job. If you don't mind, Peter, let me tell you this story. I was not the best student in high school. And so I spent a lot of Saturdays in Saturday school. Now, the typical Saturday school was one filled with manual labor. You typically have a teacher who really didn't want to be there, to be quite honest with you, and they're just kind of managing these students. And a lot of times it's the repeat offenders like me who were there over and over and over and again. And so I was there this particular Saturday, and we had to get this project done. So in this particular situation, we had to move dirt from one side of the campus to the other side of the campus. We were told, well, just get a wheelbarrow and scoop the dirt up with a shovel, move it over here. And you look at the job and you're like, there's no way this dirt's going to get moved over here in this way. It's just not a good process. So we spent about 2 or 3 Saturdays working on this project. And for 2 Saturdays, we had a really controlling, certainly not what you would call psychologically safe sponsor there managing the Saturday school. So we did the minimal amount of work. But this new leader comes in one day. He's really starting to provide a lot of clarity on the project. And he sells us on this idea that, hey, if we can get this project done, maybe we can get out of here a little early, and that'll be a good thing for all of us. And if we can do this project, it's going to be for the football field. And a lot of you guys are football players. It's going to make the football field better. It's going to help you. And he sells us on this idea that if we'll just work hard, things will be good for everybody. Now this guy's got me thinking about this project. What can we do to get this thing done? Whereas before, my creativity was just kind of turned off and I just didn't care. I just want to get out of there. Now I'm thinking like him, what do we need to do to get this project done? I started looking at the wheelbarrows and I'm like, maybe 2 cubic feet of dirt per person's not the most efficient way to do this. There's got to be a better way to do it. Now, I had this truck that I loved back in high school, and I wouldn't let people touch it. I wouldn't take it in the mud. I loved that truck and was very protective of it. But I also knew that if we could get bigger loads of dirt and get this dirt moved quicker and faster, we could get this thing knocked out. So I volunteered to use my truck, and he was like, Eric, that's a really good idea. So we all loaded up in my truck. We went and we got 2 loads, and we were done, about half the day, and we all went home early. But I know that's kind of a silly example, but the point I'm trying to make is 2 different leaders, 2 different approaches. We're trying to do the same things, but it was a simple matter of approach, how one leader treated us versus how the other leader treated us, and what kind of environment that second leader set up yielded such better results. No matter what the scenario, if the leader creates the right environment and engages the creativity and the brains of the team, you can get so much work done and you can get such really good results. And again, I think intent-based leadership gives you the framework in which to do that.
So let's finish, Eric, and I appreciate your time today. You've been extremely generous. I think we share this passion and belief that you can lead in different ways. There's a different way of doing it, and that the values and practices of intent-based leadership offer something which is different, is hugely impactful when it's done well. But at the moment, the reality is it's common sense, but it's not common practice. What would your advice be to leaders who are involved in working in manufacturing, large operations, who would be considering, or thinking about how do we improve performance? How do we want to lead our business? What's your advice?
Well, it's a pretty big question, but I think, taking a page from sports, I would start with the business goal that you have. What is it that we're ultimately trying to do? And I think where most organizations and most leaders, for that matter, miss the boat is the next part of that, which is what are the critical things that you need to do to get those results? I think you've got to practice your way to new thinking, not think your way to a new environment or a new situation. And so my advice would be, again, whatever you want to achieve, do a great job. And by the way, share the intent with your team. Go to your team and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. You don't need someone to tell you what to do or to push you to do it. You just got that internal desire to do it. And a big piece of getting that from your team, getting the want to from your team, so to speak, is setting up the right environment.
Well, Eric, that feels like a good place to call things to a halt. There's so much richness in terms of what you've shared. Really, really appreciate it. Maybe we can pick up have another conversation. But for now, thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. It's always good to see you, and best of luck to you and a great organization.